Hello. I'd like to thank the conference organizers for providing me the opportunity to present today, and I'm sorry I couldn't be in Athens in person. My research is funded by the Foundation for a Smoke-Free World. This is their funding statement, emphasizing our complete editorial discretion. The analogy of an ecosystem has been used to describe the diverse range of nicotine products now available. Today, I want to suggest that this analogy holds at a more fundamental level too, with implications for the way that we think about tobacco harm reduction and tobacco control. Evidence from clinical and real-world settings confirms that e-cigarettes are a catalyst for smoking cessation. They're not only more popular than traditional cessation aids, they also outperform them. Those who switch completely see improvements in lung and cardiovascular function and demonstrable reductions in toxin exposure. On some risk indicators, studies have found no difference between exclusive e-cigarette users and those who never smoked or used e-cigarettes. However, for some people, e-cigarettes introduce novel risk elements, including nicotine dependence. And so e-cigarette regulation forces regulators to confront trade-offs. A key question is how to achieve an optimal balance of available benefits and avoidable harms. Using transition probabilities and other available data, it's possible to model the outcome of e-cigarette use in a population under various scenarios. Adopting reasonable priors, such models demonstrate the public health value of e-cigarettes. I've linked to some of these studies and their findings in the slide. Such models imply that regulation should encourage smokers to switch. In some contexts, this is the case. For example, in the UK, NHS guidance and government advice encourages those who smoke to switch. And unlike combustible, e-cigarettes are not heavily taxed, providing an additional incentive to do so. The UK is even offering free devices to many of those who still smoke. Elsewhere, however, including in Mexico and India, concerns about youth vaping, nicotine dependence, and the plausible but unproven risks of e-cigarettes have led to prohibitions. Importantly, none of these countries bans combustible cigarettes, so prohibitions risk keeping some people, perhaps many, using more dangerous products. Predictably, however, bans fail to eliminate demand for e-cigarettes. Enforcement challenges typically mean that even where they're banned formally, illicit e-vapor products remain widely available. In these contexts, however, the absence of regulatory oversight has implications for consumer safety. Further, the absence of an incentive to ID customers means that illicit market supplies to children. Australia's Therapeutic Goods Administration has acknowledged that the de facto ban there has failed either to protect young Australians nor provide access to adult smokers, a worst of both worlds scenario. Elsewhere too, e-cigarette regulation has led to suboptimal outcomes. In the US, the introduction of e-cigarette taxes has been found to increase smoking among adolescents, as well as young adults and pregnant women. It's not just taxes. By one estimate, the US federal flavor restrictions on e-pods prompted 14% of adult e-cigarette users to return to smoking. Elevated smoking rates have also been reported among high school students following San Francisco's 2018 flavor ban. E-cigarette age restrictions appear to have a similar unintended consequence. According to one study, a 30% decrease in youth vaping resulting from US MLSAs comes at the expense of an 18% relative increase in regular or heavy cigarette smoking by youth. Again, similar responses have been reported among pregnant rural teens, and apparently, like the products they concern, e-cigarette regulation is not risk-free. The reason for these unintended consequences is that e-cigarettes and combustibles are largely economic substitutes. Much work has been done to examine the effect of price changes on consumer demand, but affordability is not the only factor influencing consumer behavior. Where cigarettes are ubiquitous, restricting access to safer alternatives, for example, by limiting sales to specific outlets, imposes a transaction cost on the consumer, tipping the scales in favor of smoking. Regulation that stifles innovations that would otherwise increase the perceived acceptability of e-cigarettes as a substitute for combustibles may do likewise. Consumers' knowledge and beliefs also matter. Skepticism regarding the safety or efficacy of e-cigarettes as a cessation aid is a primary reason why those who smoke do not switch. Health communications emphasizing e-cigarettes risks may inadvertently keep people smoking. As with most natural ecosystems, the nicotine ecosystem provides consumers with options. When first-order preferences are limited in some way, alternatives become more appealing. Events that intend to influence one modality of consumption specifically inadvertently affect the relative appeal of substitutes, and demand follows. Viewing the nicotine ecosystem from this perspective suggests the value of eschewing demand reduction strategies focused on safer products in isolation in favor of more nuanced interventions that consider the interrelationships between sets of substitutes. That has implications for both the way that we communicate risk and the way that we regulate products of different risk. It's not sufficient to make safer alternatives available but regulate them in the same manner as combustibles, nor to report only that there are no safe tobacco products. Regulators must communicate which products are safer and use regulatory differentials to create additional incentives for substitutions to less risky alternatives. Now, obviously, there will be some concerns that proposals to make e-cigarettes more acceptable to those who smoke also increase their appeal for those who do not. However, in many instances, regulatory differentials could be made by targeting the combustible side specifically. Selling reduced-risk products could be made a precondition of selling combustibles, at least for vendors of scale or those whose outlets are not age-gated. Shelf space and point-of-sale displays could similarly serve to incentivize less risky product selection. Inserts in combustibles could communicate to those already using the products that safer options exist. Substitution-themed public health messaging could be permitted in age-gated venues where tobacco is sold. Note that in these instances, the risk communication component could be targeted largely or exclusively to those already engaging with combustibles. Such a strategy may reduce the perceived need for demand reduction policies, which, as discussed, have unintended consequences. This approach offers other benefits too. Faced with additional restrictions on combustible cigarettes, consumers have options. Some will quit, but others will continue to use the products with which they're familiar, sourced, if necessary, from the illicit market. And that response challenges the utility of tobacco controls, including additional taxes or the very low nicotine product standard or menthol ban planned by the FDA. By offering an appealing substitute, regulated e-cigarettes may serve as a safety valve against the illicit trade response to regulation, and plausibly increasing the intended goal of tobacco control, namely smoking cessation. Commercial e-cigarettes also shift the costs of smoking cessation to the user. In England, between 2011 and 2021, public spending on pharmacotherapies fell from more than £60 million to less than 20 million. And during this time, quit rates rose by 12 percentage points. Those funds can then be reallocated towards other programs addressing different aims, including enforcement against the illicit trade or preventing sales to minors. The polarized discourse on e-cigarettes often paints harm reduction and tobacco control as being mutually antithetical, the trade-offs between the welfare of different consumer groups as being immutable. However, by adopting a systems perspective view of the nicotine ecosystem, it may be possible to identify regulatory strategies which benefit both those who smoke and those who do not. This perspective may go some way to reconcile tobacco harm reduction with tobacco control. Thank you.